and Wildlife Service, and the Border Patrol or border, whatever they're called,
Customs and Border
sorry.
Protection.
Okay, we'll use our formal name, fine. And other groups and agencies, so a big collaboration. And before that, she was a postdoc out in Seattle working on wolf models.
And then tufted puffins
and tufted
at the end there.
So pretty cool diversity. And before that, she worked for Panthera for many years, doing a lot of different cat species. I'm just going to leave it at that.
And that was actually really good. So
I remember some things. Okay. Okay.
Also, Neville, so I can't hear myself the same way I could hear myself yesterday. Is this audio good? Audio's good? Okay.
Okay. So today what we've agreed to do is an open Q&A. I do have a series of questions. Some of you gave questions already online in advance, but I also want to make sure we have opportunities to just ask questions in the room. So we can kind of go back and forth. If anybody has a question at any time, just raise your hand. And if not, I will go off this list, and I did not bring my readers. Okay, so we have questions. I'm just going to say, though, to start with, we have questions related to origins and careers, secrets of success and advice, science, from science to conservation, and the future. So would you like to pick a topic to start with?
Oh my God, is this like Jeopardy?
Yeah.
I'll take
200.
Yeah. Man, I kind of forget what the first ones were. What about the one with advice for 400, please?
Okay, secrets of success and advice. Okay, I'll start off with a question, but if you guys have anything on this theme, well, please chip in. Okay, so how do you decide which avenues of research to pursue?
Oh man, okay, that's a hard one. The truth of the matter is that often I was kind of told what to do, working on projects that already had funding and so needed deliverables to funders, things like that. Now that I'm a PI, and I've been a PI now for 16 months, I definitely have a bit more freedom to answer the questions that I want to answer. But in my case, starting a new professorship, I was kind of given money from Fish and Wildlife to broadly, lead ocelot reintroduction, and broadly to like study mountain lions in the borderlands area between Texas and Mexico. So you are limited in some ways, but then within that area, you can pursue kind of whatever interests you, so long as you are kind of sort of mostly following what the grantor is interested in. So in the case of ocelots, they want to know how many there are. They want to know population parameter estimates like survival and reproduction and things like that. But then also I was like, well, if we're talking about, species, recovery and species reintroduction, disease is certainly a component, right? And so this was totally not on the contract whatsoever, but I knew there was a feral cat colony adjacent to one of those ocelot populations. And I was like, if I team up with this epidemiologist in the department, we can study, and I talked about this yesterday, but that interplay among domestic cats and bobcats and ocelots, and whether bobcats are, an intermediary host of disease spread, from, feral cats to this endangered species, or maybe bobcats are a non-competent host and buffering ocelots from disease. So I found that, and also with like the density stuff, like, could we have just used cameras? Sure, we would have gotten really great estimates of density from cameras, but then I was like, scat dogs, that sounds fun. I'm really curious to what extent scat dogs can kind of add information and improve our estimation of something like density. So I feel like I can answer what the funder wants, but also pursue things that I find personally interesting. So I would say that you do need to respect your funder's wishes, but also just find your little nooks and crannies to do fun things that will satisfy them and also just do cool stuff.
All right. We have a couple more questions in this category, but okay. I'm going to combine two here because I think they're pretty related. So what are some things you've learned now that you're still somewhat an early career researcher
Oh
as an
yeah.
assistant professor? So, but you've gone through all the stages that a lot of folks in this room are still at. So what are some of the things you've learned now that you're an assistant professor that you wish you had known when you had first started out in science? And does that include any quantitative tools or software programs that you would recommend folks learned as graduate students or postdocs to be able to get into the position you're in?
These are good questions. Okay. Um, let's see. When it comes to what things I wish I had known, I think it was like the power of like collaboration. So when I was doing my PhD, so my master's was not a traditional academic degree. It was a Master of Environmental Management at Duke University, where I became like a whiz in GIS and remote sensing. And that was very like individualized. And it was just a lot of coursework. And then you kind of produce something at the end and they say, good job. In my PhD, I was in the Frere lab at SUNY ESF, and I was still working for Panthera part-time. And so, 20 hours a week, I would work exclusively on Panthera stuff that was completely unrelated to the PhD. And the other 3 days a week, I would devote to my PhD and a bunch of questions related to lions in Angola and jaguars in Central America and African lions in Zimbabwe. And I didn't learn the merits of collaboration then, because others in my lab were working on coyotes, and they were working on jaguars in the Pantanal, and they were working on things, and everyone just had a very like individual project, and like no one really helped one another. I didn't start troubleshooting other people's code until I was a postdoc. So like I didn't really get a sense of like how important it was to like be, also had to be super regimented about my time in order to like do the 20 hours a week for Panthera. And then does everyone TA here generally? Like, oh my gosh. So, it depends. So some of you do, some of you don't. So it was really hard. So when I felt like I had time for PhD, I was like laser focused on what I had to do that day. And I wasn't thinking enough about like how I can help others like with their GIS and their remote sensing. Because you'll find that as a PI, like you are not working in a silo. You need to rely heavily on other people with different strengths, with different skill sets. It is not just about you and completing manuscript 1, 2, 3, 4. It's about creating a team where you together as one can like kind of push things towards the finish line. So I started seeing that a lot as a postdoc. We would get together as a lab, and we were working on a paper together, and on Slack we would be sharing code and helping each other. And that is just a huge part of being a scientist that I wish I had gained skills in sooner. And yeah, now like the power of delegation. So like there are times when I think, man, if I just did all of this myself, like I think things would get done faster and possibly like it would be done better or something. But that's just impossible. You find that you reach your limit, and it's like, no, I am going to give you, new master's student, you are going to write this IACUC protocol for this project. Like if I did it, would it be like way faster and probably written a little bit better? Yeah, but I actually do not have time. So you're going to do it. And so I had to learn to like lean on people and build those skill sets, and in the lab make sure that people were working with one another and supporting one another. As for the quantitative,
because there's a question related to what you just said. So I'm going to switch gears and come back to the
okay,
skills.
Yep.
We'll come back to specific skills that you think students and postdocs should learn later. Remind me. Okay. What advice do you have for students/young academics about building a network of collaborators?
Yeah. So, man, when I was a grad student, so I don't know, I might come across as this really like social outgoing person, but I'm like socially like paralyzed in certain like conference situations when I see people who I respect and admire. So it took me until last TWS to go up to you and say like, oh, hi, Julie, I'm Lisanne. And then it was just, I felt so awkward. And I'd known who you were for years, and I respected your work so much. And was it literally in Louisville, or where were we the year before? Was it Louisville where It was Spokane. It was Spokane where I finally had the courage, and I was like a postdoc at UW at that point, to like go up to Julie Young and say, "Hello, I admire your work. Bye." And so I really think that
I was
like
mean.
she was so mean. She's like, "Get away from me." No, she was very nice. And so I think that even if you feel like you're nobody and like no one should ever want to talk to you because you're a loser or something, you like really get over that fear and just introduce yourself to someone you admire. Even if you say something awkward and like run away, just like do it, because it's really amazing how, in fact, a student who became a PhD student of Jackie Frere introduced herself and remains like one of the most awkward encounters like I've ever had with a potential student. But she made enough of an impression where I was like, well, I'm not a PI yet, but let me connect you with Jackie Frere. And she went on to do a master's with Jackie Frere, is now a PhD student at Oxford. And like I connected them and things worked out super well. So even if you think an encounter was like pretty awkward, it just do it, because you have absolutely nothing to lose. And so I would say, yeah, and also like when speakers are here, I was amazed at people. So I would never have signed up to meet with a speaker as a grad student. I'm just too awkward and nervous, and like I would say something stupid. And I was amazed how people came to talk to me who worked in like watershed science and geology. And so I came to these meetings like, are they going to ask me like serious questions about models? Do I need to? And they're just literally there to like ask, hey, so how are things going as like a new professor, and what advice do you have for, grad students looking to do something similar in their careers? So like just set up meetings and just like talk. They're just people. And I'm telling myself that advice too, because I was pretty intimidated for some of these meetings with people who I had a lot of respect for before ever showing up on this campus. So just, yeah, introduce yourself, make connections with people you respect, and somehow that momentum will lead to things happening for you. Like if you do nothing and if you don't go to these meetings and you don't introduce yourself, you're literally like shutting the door in your own face and like making your nose bleed or something. I don't know. So just like do it. Just get over it. I know that it's awkward and scary, but just like do it.
All right, we'll go back then to skills. So on top of the skill of being bold and introducing yourself to people,
Yeah.
what other skills do you think, especially the question specifically says quantitative schools or software programs, but you can speak more broadly.
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is I do not come from a wildlife background. So my undergrad was in abnormal psychology, biomedical engineering, and environmental studies. So there was no wildlife program at the undergrad school I went to. I went to Duke and became good at GIS and remote sensing. And by the way, all of those skills are like crazily antiquated now already. And I graduated in 2010. So great. And so there is no way I would have gotten hired by Panthera if I did not have the skills in GIS and remote sensing that I did. I was literally a geospatial analyst. I started out like making maps for species programs. Then they're like, oh, she can do other stuff. And then I started doing, analyses for species programs. And then it just kept building, building, building. So getting my foot in the door required definitely luck, but also having that skill set of GIS and analyzing satellite imagery. I would never have gotten my postdoc at UW working with two crazy mad geniuses in the form of Sarah Converse and Beth Gardner at the University of Washington. Like I never, ever would have been competitive ever for that job had I not had quantitative skills. So at ESF, there weren't, feel bad saying this, but there weren't strong quantitative classes applicable to ecology. So I will say I had a great regression course and a good advanced regression course. And then you're just kind of on your own. So I taught myself, which is not hard because there's really good books out there, how to do kind of Bayesian analysis for ecology. So the books by Mark Carey, like Introduction to Wind Bugs for Ecologists. That is how I basically did 2 chapters of my PhD based on skills I learned from that book. And then the series just kind of continues. So also that being said, I do consider myself a quantitative ecologist, right? I'm not saying that everyone in this room, oh my God, you need to read this book right now or you're never going to get a postdoc. For me, in the track that I took, given that I didn't have that traditional wildlife background, to kind of become a PI of carnivore ecology. I kind of came in through the back door of, hey, I do GIS. And then I started getting involved in all these different projects. And hey, look, I know how to analyze data in kind of cool ways sometimes. And then that led to UW. And then being at UW, it's like, oh, she's in the big leagues now or something, even though I went from 0 to 100 in that postdoc, like learning so much from my mentors, and that's what led me a faculty job. So you can be a professor in wildlife without ever having a true wildlife degree. So my PhD was in ecology. So, but I still have never taken a course in like wildlife management or like mammalogy. If you gave me a bone, I'd be like, that's a really cool bone. I don't know what it is.
All right. We're gonna do a transitional question because there's one, the last one in this topic kind of gets us also into origins and career. So, the question in this topic is, what advice do you have for students who haven't yet found their science niche? And so the questions in origins is then, how did you find your niche in carnivore ecology? So I think they could be kind of combined.
Okay. Who haven't yet found their science niche? Well, one thing is that, so if you're in a master's degree program where, you kind of sort of thought this is what you wanted, but you're not 100% sure that it's the right one. Well, I think that first of all, you committed to this, and that's awesome. But there is room within wildlife sciences, or I know there's also like watershed sciences and geology and like all kinds of sciences. I apologize for just speaking about wildlife. There is so much room to like horizontally shift among different kind of realms, so long as you have those core skills that are transferable across fields or niches, if you will. So, maybe this isn't as big a stretch, but, carnivore ecology is kind of a tough thing to get into. And I listed a PhD position for kind of a quantitative PhD for the ocelot density work and the scat dog stuff. And, this guy applied whose background was in this like weird species of snake and had no experience whatsoever and like carnivore trapping but he had those like fundamental skills where I'm like, yeah, you've never worked in the system. You're going to be a fish out of water when it comes to like the trapping and camera traps and all of these things. But like, we can teach you that, like the fundamentals of how to do these types of analyses is the harder thing. So, hired this kid and he's like totally kicking butt. And so I'm not sure that his lifeblood was in snakes. And I think his true lifeblood was perhaps in the carnivore world. And he was able to like shift from that master's to doing something that was more aligned because he already had those fundamental skills. And so there's definitely something to be said for that. In fact, now that I think about it, like when I was doing my master's, I thought this connects with the second question. I thought that I was just going to be like a GIS nerd, like making maps for people. And then, through this like tortuous kind of path, I wound up being like a professor of cats. And I never would have guessed that would happen. So, and also, like, if you are like younger than me, so I'm turning 40 this year, like you have so much time and space to do whatever the hell you want. So if you feel like pigeonholed into, oh, I only study, Ollie, I'm just going to use you as an example, microfossils and like silica ratios and isotopes, like, but actually she really loves that. But like, you're not limited, but if you wanted to do something, you absolutely can. And as to how I got my origin story, so I grew up the daughter of an immigrant in the suburbs of New Jersey, and I had never stepped foot in a national park or national forest until I was 18. But I don't know, I always was interested in the natural world. My mom is Australian. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But I really, I thought at one point I wanted to be a psychiatrist. So my primary major as an undergrad was abnormal psychology. Like I wanted to go to medical school and diagnose people with disorders and help them. And then I went on a study abroad program to Tanzania, where I got to do behavioral observations and studies of the whole mammal assemblage in Tanzania. And I was like, oh, so you can do this like as a career? And so as a junior, I went from like, man, I would have been miserable as a psychiatrist, by the way. So I went like, yeah, I'm gonna like do what everyone wants me to be. And then went off to the wildlife worlds, or couldn't really figure out how to get there in the beginning. And so went to Duke and did the GIS thing. And then I think getting the job at Panthera is what set me up for the career that I now have. And yeah, I was sharing earlier that it was all just a matter of luck and happenstance, where during my master's, I would write to Panthera. So like the geospatial analyst at the time had graduated from the same program as me at Duke. So I wrote to him, hey, can I have some shape files? And he sent them to me. And then I was like, oh, so I got 5,000 for a summer fellowship. Like, do you have any on the ground work that you want done for free? And he's like, yeah, go down to Belize and do some stuff for us. And I was like, okay. I did a good job. Then they're like, okay, come back next summer and do the same thing in a different part of Belize. Okay. And then Sahil's like, oh, I'm going to UCL for my PhD. So my position's coming open. So you should apply for it. And then I applied for it and I got it. So again, just like weird, the fact that he'd gone to the same school as me and we connected. And then he had left at the exact time I was coming back from Mozambique. And then so yeah, my origin story is that it was not direct and there was just a lot of luck involved, which is often the case.
All right. The next question under origins and career is, how important has mentorship, you kind of spoke about this, but we'll get into more depth here. How important has mentorship been for you as a researcher, and how do you view your role as a mentor for your students and others?
Okay, so now that I'm officially a mentor, what I'll say is that, so in my career, I have had good mentors, and I have to speak really broadly now. I've had good mentors and bad mentors. A certain bad mentor led me to nearly leave this field altogether, where I felt this person was like actively blocking career advancement for me. I had to self-fund my way to international conferences to present my work. There was no upward mobility. And I was like, what is going on? You're supposed to be supporting me and pushing me my best person, and you're not, and it sucks. And so other mentors have been certainly more supportive and kind and really dedicated to my professional growth. And so like those, learning from those people, I have incorporated from them what is good in, a mentor-mentee relationship. And I learned from the bad mentor what not to do in a mentor-mentee relationship. So I'm not sure. I mean, of course, I wish I could just erase the impact that this person had on my life. But I also did, like, I learned from it in the sense of like, I don't ever want someone to feel that way ever when I'm supervising them. So so again, like I truly have no idea what I'm doing on a daily basis. But I'm just kind of like literally every day is like a new like battle for survival. But I just try to, I don't know, like I am kind of like, I just want to be the mechanism for these students to come through this program, get the skills that they want, to get the education that they want, to get the writing skills that they want, to get them to where they want to go next. I don't know, I'm like this riverboat captain or something, where I'm just taking them on this journey. And my job is to, support them, during times of mental struggle. I mean, doing a graduate program is really hard, especially when like permits are taking forever and landowners are being weird and controlling. I mean, my job is to kind of buffer students from those kind of negative aspects of things. And really, it's like, hey, like, where do you want to go and how can I help you get there? So like as a postdoc, I don't know if you feel this way too, Julie, but I felt like as a postdoc, it's all about like you, like you got to publish and you got to like get your name out there so you can get a permanent job, so you can stop living in someone's basement in Seattle, And now that you're faculty, like I mean, I was always no one, but like now I'm really no one. Now it's like the students are the focus, the research is the focus. And I'm basically just like I'm just admin at this point, signing purchase orders, getting money, making sure permits are in place and getting these students to where they need to go. So it's like a radical shift from like weirdly focusing on yourself a bit too much to now not focusing on yourself at all. Do you feel that you had that kind of transition?
Yeah, I think the postdoc phase relative to even graduate school or academia or whatever job is the most self-centered phase for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh.
Maybe other postdocs in here. I mean, not self-centered like you're being a jerk, but
Where
self-centered is
you're just trying to like get things out and like make an impact.
a good postdoc mentor will make it that you have those opportunities. Yeah. All right. Before we go on, we're nearly the halfway point. So we're going to switch to science and science to conservation. But before we do, I just want to take a pause to see if anybody in the room or online wanted to add any additional questions to secrets of success and advice or origins and career. So are there any additional follow-up questions? Yes.
Thank you so much for your answers. And I just wanted to follow up on this experience of almost leaving science because you had a really poor person mentoring you. And I wondered if you had any words for if someone goes through that, or what kind of what brought you back, and how can people know when they should keep pushing, not, and just, yeah, how did you kind of get through that and come through the other side still in science? It's too common.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like I had always thought that if you are kind to others every day and just do good work and you don't screw up, if you go in every day with good intentions, like that's enough. And you're just going to keep going. Everything's going to be just like fabulous for you. And what I learned in that specific role was that you can be doing, like you can be well liked, you can be doing good work. But if someone's going to stand in your way, they can ruin you. Like they can absolutely ruin you. And when that happened to me, it was really, really, really dark. And so much of my identity was in that role that I thought that when I was no longer in that role, that my life was over. Like I'm not going to be able to do anything else. I'm blacklisted now. And what I learned is that, like, wait, like, was there any evidence to support the fact that I'm not a good scientist, that I'm not a good person? Like, where is the evidence to support these ideas that maybe someone had about me? And I realized, like, there actually is no evidence to support these things. This person was possibly threatened, or maybe just a serious personality mismatch. And maybe the issue was more with that person and not with me. And so then I was like, I'm not going to let this person, I mean, it took a while. This wasn't some light bulb moment, but I was like, wait a second, I'm not going to let this one person, of all the people that I've worked with, like, I'm not going to let this one person ruin my self-worth and my ability to like contribute to this field. And so my PhD advisor threw me a lifeline and said, hey, well, I've got a postdoc on bats. You want to work on bats for a while? And I was like, yes, sure. Anything, please. And so I worked on a 6-month postdoc on bats and then applied for the postdoc at UW with those two like super, super awesome human beings. And then things just kind of developed from there. But I think that during those harder times, I was just like, is there any evidence to support the fact that I'm not worthy of being in this field? Is it true that I have nothing to contribute to this field? And I realized, like, yeah, like, no. So, but there's also, super valid reasons to not continue if you're feeling like this just isn't your thing anymore. Like if it's not supporting you, if it's not nourishing you, intellectually, if you're, you know, in a difficult financial place, and if you just went and became a data scientist at Google, your life would be better. I thought about that when I was living in Seattle. I was literally living in a basement of some tech bro, and I was like, these same exact skills. So I was not making very much at UW, and I was, but it was such a great experience. I'm sorry. But I was like, man, if I went and became a data scientist, I would be making like 150K out the gate. And I was like, man, I would be financially so much better off. So like, there are totally valid reasons to be like, yeah, maybe this like isn't for me. Maybe there's like a better path for me. So I'm not saying like, if you feel like things like aren't quite right, to just like keep going. Cause like there could be super good reasons why maybe like this ain't it, right? But make sure that it's for the right reasons.
I'm going to ask one other question about career. I think it would be career advice. We're
Okay.
combining things. So you've worked in the nonprofit world and in academia now. And can you talk about, are there different things that maybe our graduate students and postdocs should be doing or to prepare if they want to go one way or the other, or are they very similar, et cetera? So, you know, just kind of, can you talk about the differences and if there's differences in training or experience that they may need? Or why one might be better or worse than the other? I don't know if you want to go.
Sure. Yeah. So I did spend 9 years at Panthera, a nonprofit, and then I've now been in academia since 2020. And I'll say that I've also gotten older and I have more responsibility, so it's kind of hard to like tease that apart. But I work a lot harder in academia. I'm also just managing a lot of money right now, and again, I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. So I would say that like, just to answer it in like broad strokes, you would maybe possibly not work as many hours in the nonprofit world. I would say that in academia, especially if you're thinking about, you know, postdoc positions and professor positions, they weirdly value like the currency of publishing, like literal like metrics of like how many papers you've put out and in what journals. And that's kind of aggravating. Because I would say that like one, like really, so the paper that I came out with this year took 2.5 years to write. So like when I was at Panthera, I was putting out like, yeah, like 2-3 papers a year, and I was killing it. But I've never been more proud of anything than this one paper that I put out. So I don't know, there's this weird value placed on, you know, publications and things that I don't think is entirely fair. You know, if you're interested in academia, like gaining some teaching experience at the graduate level is definitely like a really, really good thing that wouldn't necessarily be as applicable in the nonprofit world. But really like the ability to work as a team, the ability to mentor, the ability to get things funded, you know, that's common across both. And I would say that with academia, you don't really you don't get too much of a choice about where you end up. You kind of go with, you know, jobs that are on offer and which ones you get shortlisted for. And then, oh my God, you get an offer. And then I would say that if you were to tell me 5 years ago that I would be leading ocelot research in South Texas, I would have laughed for like a whole week. And now I'm there, and it's actually like a pretty good life. So yeah, academia certainly has its unpredictabilities with like what opportunities are available. You can't just like apply for jobs on like, you know, that you can't just like Google a job and go apply in that town and like get it. It's like, so their job opportunities are just kind of sparse and not necessarily in your like dream towns. Logan though really is one. So like you got really lucky, Julie, but you've been here forever. You're really lucky to be here. But yeah, you don't always get to land in a beautiful place like this. But South Texas, it has its really cool parts too.
All right, last call. I mean, you can come back to this topic. I'm not gonna.
Do you feel like you have like a lot more freedom in what you're doing now that you're in academia compared to your job
Ooh.
at Panthera?
Oh, heck yeah. So God, that's such a good point that I don't know why I didn't think of that. But yeah, when I worked as for the nonprofit, I was there from 9:30 to 5:30 every single day in the head office in New York City. I had 15 vacation days. I had to apply for when I could take those vacation days. I had to call in sick days. It was a job, right? It was a 9:30 to 5:30 job every single day. And I did what was on the docket for that day. I couldn't be like, hey, so I'm actually really interested in exploring this. It'd be like, great, do what like we need you to do, please. And that made sense. I had a boss who was directing this landscape analysis lab, and that made total sense. Like I was working for this person and for the lab at large. Now that I'm a professor, I'll say like that aspect, that independence is awesome. So, you're definitely working hard. But if I decide I just don't want to go to work tomorrow, or if I decide like I want to go out and visit the mountain lion team, or I want to go out and visit the ocelot trapping team, like I can do that. If I want to disappear in June to go to that Bayesian course in Fort Collins, like I can just go. I don't need to be like, ask my boss if I can go do that. And in terms of the research I was saying before, like, yeah, you're funded by people, but you can also find your area within that grant to have like a pretty wide amount of intellectual freedom. So yeah, that ability to like be your own boss and like not have a certain number of like vacation days and sick days every year. And depending on where you are, the pay can be like quite good for an academic too. Like I was able to buy a home in South Texas on an acre. I might die alone, but that's okay. And yeah, I'm able to like live a pretty good life and not feel as though I have like a bunch of people who I need to ask for permission to do things. So that is like a mega, mega difference. But I'm guessing, managers in the nonprofit world may have a similar amount of freedom, but probably do have a bit more of that admin structure they have to work with.
All right, we'll move on to science. Okay. Um, how might the impacts of global change on species range shift drive recovery of endangered species? So what aspects are you particularly considering for, in this case, ocelots that are maybe less important for more common species, or how are you dealing with this, with dealing with the recovery?
So being like basically how climate change is impacting endangered species conservation. But what was the piece with the more common species?
I'll just read the whole question again.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I kind of botched it. Okay.
No,
How
you
might
did it.
the impacts of global change on species range shift drive recovery of ocelots? What
Okay.
aspects may you consider for endangered species that are less important for common species?
Say that last part again.
What aspects may you consider
Consider.
related to global climate change for an endangered species that you might not have to consider for more common species?
Okay, got it. Woo, man, that's a big one. So in South Texas, it is already very hot, and there are pretty consistent drought periods. And so to that end, I have a newly hired postdoc who is working right now on evaluating, and we're seeing if we have the data to even answer this, but to see how like climactic extremes in the form of like temperature and droughts have impacted fine scale habitat use of ocelots. So and for bobcats too, if we can, because ocelots are kind of the specialists and bobcats are the generalists. How do they behave differently in these times of temperature extremes? Do they limit their movements? And some questions I'm not sure we'll be able to answer in terms of water availability. Are they getting their water from prey if seasonal water sources dry up? These are things that I don't know how we're going to answer them using past data. And there was a paper published recently, this was before my time, about how ocelot range may shift shift as temperatures warm. There could be this like northward shift of ocelot habitat based purely on like the climate envelope, but I'm not sure that the habitat structure would necessarily support that shift in ocelots. So there is a potential for like a northward migration. I know that now there's like isn't there like a southern migration of coyotes, which are a competitor for ocelots and bobcats. Currently, like their kind of southernmost extent is around where ocelots are at their southernmost extent. So that overlap of ocelots and bobcat could potentially increase, and that's really interesting. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this, species that could number, less, we don't know, but could, number less than 100 individuals, like how they will respond as temperatures increase, as drought likely intensifies, how that will affect their overlap with bobcat and with coyote. We know that coyote will depredate on ocelots, and I'm sure it happens with bobcat as well with, interspecific aggression. So yeah, we will see. And it's something that's of interest to me. And I think that we're just going to need to continue like collecting those long-term data streams to be able to separate, what could be happening as a result of climate shifts.
All right, folks, think of your other science questions. I am going to ask a next one, though, here on the list. When studying an endangered species like ocelots, what are your strategies for effectively communicating? Or you could actually talk back from Panthera endangered species. Sorry, I shouldn't be narrowing this. What are your strategies for effectively communicating the science versus advocacy of protection and recovery?
So it really depends on context. So is the question about like speaking from the science perspective versus the advocacy side of things?
Yeah, I think the idea is how do you make sure that it's almost like going from science to communication, and how are you making sure that you're or are you even worried about communicating the science versus, it getting into the advocacy realm?
Yeah, okay. So I did understand the question. Whoa. So that again is like super context specific. I think with ocelots, because they're really a really beautiful, I mean, that's like a silly word to use maybe, but like they're a really beautiful species. Like seeing them in person, it actually took my breath away. I'd never seen an ocelot in the wild before getting this job, and it was really breathtaking. And I can see, so like the idea of ocelots being in Texas, like everyone is pretty on board with that, right? So like the private ranches where they exist, those landowners, like they're not going to do anything to them. They don't want the feds moving in whatsoever. So like they don't want us to place camera traps on their property, but they're going to allow ocelots to remain. They're of no threat to them and their existence and the hunting economy and all of that. So I can
wait real quick. Do they kill any livestock? Somebody asked me that yesterday from your talk.
So they would definitely go after poultry, but in this part of Texas, this is a cattle ranching part of the state, and so there's no depredation with ocelots, or this would be a different story. So I feel pretty comfortable. So I was at Ocelot Conservation Day at the Gladys Porter Zoo in a border town at the border. And, I was able to talk about the importance of ocelots and ocelot conservation and recovery. And it was just like, yeah, like everyone's like totally on board with that. Mountain lions, the other species I work on, for those of you who weren't at my talk yesterday, mountain lions have no protected status. They are non-game. You can shoot them, you can harvest them, you can trap them by any means necessary in any quantity at any time for any reason. So they are considered a pest species. Generally, there are some landowners, so I don't mean to paint broad strokes. There are some landowners who love the fact that there are mountain lions on their property. However, the majority will shoot them on site and will hire houndsmen to tree lions and shoot them. Because they're considered a competitor for the deer hunting economy that is so important to these landowners. So in the work that I do, it is extremely, extremely important to not be an advocate in any way, shape, or form for mountain lions, ever. In any conversation you have with anyone, anywhere, anytime, you cannot. It will jeopardize your project. It will jeopardize your students. It will jeopardize the institute's relationship with these landowners. It will jeopardize everything. So this is like kind of anecdotal, but there are some working in the mountain lion space who have come out, you know, with good reason, more in the advocacy realm. And there have been consequences. I have to speak vaguely, but there have been certain consequences for taking a stance that is more of an advocate role. My role now is to literally to use pure science, collaring of individuals, setting up of camera traps, use of scat dogs and houndsmen, and whatever methods we use to let the science tell the story only. Could that lead to a management plan for lions in Texas? Yeah, well, that could happen. But I can never let any personal opinions of mine kind of cloud the science that I'm trying to tell, or it could just end everything. So really important to not take an advocacy stance whatsoever. There are others who are in a better position to do that. I cannot.
All right, I'm gonna skip around. So, because I think this question kind of goes along or is probably the next part of what you just answered. But how do you manage, or maybe you don't, to hold
probably
on to
don't.
hope
Oh,
while
okay.
also remaining honest and practical with your students about current conservation challenges like climate, species conservation, and population sustainability?
Okay. True answer is that I know that I've used this phrase in meetings with others, but I do often dream about running into the abyss screaming and like never coming back. There's something like really alluring about that. But the reality is that, and I remember Sarah Converse saying this in one of my first meetings with her, like it is a true privilege to be able to work in the field. And again, I'm so sorry that I'm talking about wildlife. I know that students in this room are probably from all different disciplines, and that's really cool. But in my case, you know, I am paid to study like ocelots and mountain lions and bobcats. Like that's pretty cool. Like, yeah, I could be making like way more money at Google, but I'd be doing like boring stuff on like visitations to different websites and blah. So it really is a privilege to do what we do. And I do believe on good days, I do think that, yeah, I'm internally screaming some days, but other days I do feel that, you know, I am one person on this grand earth, and I really am like a meaningless speck of dust in the universe, but I can make like really, really like tiny improvements in the world around me, whether it's just through students that I teach or, you know, in the research that I'm doing, you know, possibly seeing the ocelot recover in my lifetime and possibly getting a management plan for mountain lions. Yeah, and being able to mentor students, and through that cascading effect, having those students go on and be able to like do really good work. So it really is easy. And it's not even just in like, oh, the state of the world, but it's hard, like permitting and managing difficult personalities and doing a bunch of admin where sometimes you don't feel like you're studying ocelots or mountain lions at all. It's like you're just like putting your electronic signature on a bunch of documents, right? But it is important to like keep perspective and to know that like, am I ultimately creating net positive on this earth? And if so, like I'm pretty comfortable with that. And there is a lot of hope and room to do good work.
Great. Okay, we only have a few minutes left, so I do have one last question. Well, I have a couple on here, but we're not going to get to them all. But I just want to make sure anybody online or in the room has a chance to ask anything before I read out the last one, because you guys, you know, are here in person, so I want to make sure you have an opportunity to ask. Yes.
This one is kind of in the advice section. So I am going into my first field season. I'm also doing density stuff with trapping and scat dogs.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Do you have any advice or anything that I should be expecting going into my very first field season?
Going into a first field season, well, be prepared. So you said you're a master's student? So be prepared to make mistakes, and that's okay. It's like someone was talking yesterday. Oh, I remember about like someone putting out cameras and like forgetting to put the memory card in. Like, yeah, like maybe like, hey, that might happen and that's fine. Just don't do it the next time. And it is okay to, and I'm sure your field season is going to go like super awesome. But in our case with the scat dogs, I was like, yeah, it's going to be the best. No one's ever run scat dogs in this part of Texas. And then literally day one, the scat dog gets attacked by a javelina and injured. And in total, we got 20 scats. And that was a very expensive effort. And literally over 20 days, we get literally 20. How many did you get over your like 10 days, Julie? Yeah, 120. Oh my God. Okay. Oh,
Great
whatever.
species, though.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't hoping for that because that's bonkers. But I was hoping for more. And the thing is, it's really easy to be like fail. But no, like the thing is like, oh, what did we learn from that? Like, how can we improve things for next time? We might get 15 next year, but it's just important to like any kind of fumbles that you make, just know that like the next time you won't make those same, well, hopefully you won't make those same mistakes and like things will just get better. This is your time to like fine tune your methods, see what works and what doesn't. Like don't expect to hit the ground and just have everything completely under control at all times. That would be like placing an unnecessary burden upon yourself. But yeah, and like things like figuring out, like, so you're using camera traps. So you're trapping live animals, and so like you're doing, okay, and also doing scat dogs, and are you doing any like hair snaring or, okay, and are there cameras too or no cameras? Okay, so just hair snares, and okay, I was gonna say if it was camera traps, like figure out how long those batteries, like how often you need to do maintenance, because you don't want those cameras to like totally, you want to make sure the vegetation is clear, and you don't want that camera to be taking pictures of like moving grass and then, you know, be completely full, but that doesn't apply to you. But yeah, just do your best and know that it's like totally fine to like not do it perfectly the first time.
All right. I think I'll ask the final question, which is what else have we not talked about that you were like, dang it, I really wanted to give this sage piece of advice to the world?
I guess, I don't know, similar to the advice I just gave about a field season, like it's okay to like not have everything 100% figured out at this point. So I'm guessing there's like people from all walks of life in the room right now, but it's okay to like not have it all. I mean, you see the trajectory my life took, and it wasn't direct, or I didn't necessarily know 100% of the time what I wanted. And just see where life takes you and know that you'll wind up where you're meant to be. And there are times that I wonder, like, what the hell am I doing in South Texas? This place is really weird. But I'm growing every day to see more and more how grateful I am to have this role and to live in this place and to do the work that I do. So just, I don't know, just, and like, yeah, grad school is hard. Work will never stop, by the way. So don't think that like, oh my God, as soon as I'm done with my master's or as soon as I'm done, like make sure that you're taking care of yourself, and that, no, seriously, and that like the work that you're doing every day, make sure that it's like sustainable, because you think like, oh my God, when this PhD is done, then like things will just be so easy. No, then you get a postdoc, right? Then you have like, you have to publish your PhD chapters, and then you have to work on this new stuff. And then, you know, you get another position where it's like, oh my God, you have to publish papers or you're not gonna keep your job. So it literally never stops. So just like find something that works. Don't kill yourselves. We are all meaningless specks in the universe, and just try to enjoy the work that you've got cut out for you, and yeah, do good things.
Well, I'm disappointed to hear next month won't be smoother, but that's okay. Let's all give a big round of applause. Thank you.
All right, thank